Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Kenyan police continue to look for more victims of a violent raid on a hotel complex in Nairobi, in which at least 21 people were killed. Hundreds of people were evacuated during Tuesday's attack. Mourners have already begun burying some of the victims. Also, DR Congo's Electoral Commission denies that it doctored the results of last month's sensitive presidential polls. It insists that opposition leader Felix Tshisekedi won, despite a joint investigation by foreign journalists pointing to data showing that it was Martin Fayulu who was the clear winner. And a South African lawyer accuses his judicial system of trying to cover up the assassination of a former Rwandan intelligence chief. Patrick Karegeya was strangled in a Johannesburg hotel in 2013. But first, the death toll from a bomb and gun attack on a hotel complex in Nairobi has risen to 21. Funerals of some of those who lost their lives were held in the Kenyan capital on Wednesday, a day after gunmen staged the raid on the Dusit D2 site. All the attackers were killed by security forces during an all-night operation. Somali extremist group Al-Shabaab claimed responsibility for the assault. Most of the victims are believed to be Kenyan, although an American and a Briton were amongst the dead. Solange Moujin tells us more.
Terror in Nairobi. Inside Hotel of Terror. There are just two of the headlines of Kenyan papers. The attack began just after 3 p.m. on Tuesday, when one of the assailants blew himself up inside the upscale Dusit Tani complex. Afterwards, shots rang out as at least 4 gunmen entered the compound through the parking lot. Authorities have confirmed that as of Wednesday morning, all of the assailants have been killed. All that remains is a clearing exercise after a siege that lasted almost 20 hours.
The security operation at Dusit complex is over, and all the terrorists eliminated. Over 700 civilians were evacuated to safety from the compound since the start of the attack through the early hours of this morning.
Family and friends of the victims gathered at Nairobi's mortuary to identify their loved ones. More victims are still being treated in local hospitals.
So it's mostly gunshot wound injuries, either to the abdomen or the chest, majority of them. And they do have a recovery period ahead of them to get to full strength.
Al-Shabaab has taken credit for the killings. They have been targeting Kenya for years. The Somali-based Islamist group vowed retribution after Kenya sent troops in 2011 to support Somalia's UN-backed government. 2 years later, the group hit Westgate shopping mall, killing 67 people. And then in 2015, the group attacked a university, killing 148 people.
An investigation by France 24's sister radio station, Radio France Internationale, and the Financial Times has turned up data that points to huge electoral fraud in DR Congo's presidential elections. Analysis of voting results that represent about 86% of total votes cast across the country appear to set Martin Fayulu as the clear winner of the poll, and not, as the Electoral Commission claimed, rival opposition leader Felix Tshisekedi. Our Thomas Nicolon tells us more.
Do Congo voting data reveal huge fraud in election to replace Joseph Kabila? This is what several media outlets, including the Financial Times and Radio France International, claim. They say that the analysis of 2 separate collections of voting data shows that opposition leader Martin Fayulu is the actual winner of the presidential election, even though the Electoral Commission said Felix Tshisekedi, another opposition leader, won the election. Congolese authorities say these allegations are illegal and intrusive.
We have to let the Constitutional Court pronounce the verdict. It's not right to interfere in between the prosecution's closing speech and the verdict right when the judges are deliberating. It's a serious violation of our judicial law. No civilized country can accept this. We don't accept it. This attempt at influencing the judges is so obvious. RFI, the FT, and Mr. Jason Stern must stop acting as if DRC was a banana republic where anything goes.
According to the Electoral Commission, Felix Tshisekedi won this presidential election, and DR Congo is waiting on the Constitutional Court to confirm or not these results. But Congo's highest court first has to review opposition leader Martin Fayulu's fraud complaint. Mr. Fayulu believes that he has won this presidential election, and he wants the Constitutional Court to cancel the results that were announced by the Electoral Commission.
Thomas Nicolas there for us. Now, Zimbabwe says that more than 600 people have been arrested as the country saw its third day of protests against a 150% hike in the price of petrol. Amongst those arrested was Pastor Evan Mawariwe, who was behind the This Flag online movement that in 2016 began calling out Robert Mugabe, the longtime president who was ousted in 2017. Faced with a deepening economic crisis, Mugabe's successor, Emmerson Mnangagwa, doubled fuel prices over the weekend. Human Rights Watch says that at least 5 people have been killed in 3 days of demonstrations against the move. Internet and mobile networks were shut down until late Wednesday afternoon. Ryan Truscott tells us more. Ryan, so after days of a blackout, the internet is now partially back in Zimbabwe. Presumably, that means people are now starting to more easily share their experiences of what's been happening. What more can you tell us about what's been going on?
The stay away because of the lack of communications. The government cut internet services on Tuesday, so it's been hard to collate information. But since the internet came up a few hours ago, we're getting a bit of a grasp of some of what's been happening in the last 30 hours since the internet went down. There are some worrying reports. You mentioned the 600 arrests. More than 200 of those have already appeared in court. But more worrying is a statement from the Zimbabwe Association of Doctors for Human Rights, which talks about the number of people that they've treated for injuries. They've dealt with 172 cases for injuries allegedly sustained by people at the hands of the security forces. Some of the details of those are quite graphic. We've been unable to corroborate that information with other sources, but I expect that in the next hours and days, more details will emerge. But this kind of violence is not what Zimbabwe needed in the wake of the post-election violence that gripped Harare back in August, when 6 people were shot dead, allegedly by the army. We had a commission of inquiry into that, and it seems incredible and awful that this violence has happened again.
And amongst those caught up in the arrests, amongst those detained was Pastor Evan Mawariwe. Does Mnangagwa's administration also see him as a threat?
Well, they believe he had some part in organizing this protest, and he was arrested at home early this morning. His sister said on Twitter, though, that the police weren't rough with him. He had his lawyers. He will be held overnight, and he's due to appear in court tomorrow morning. Many will see parallels with this flag protest in 2016, when he was arrested for leading protests against former President Robert Mugabe. But in the last few months, he hasn't had the profile that he had back then. But he did come out before this strike and say that people should support it, but to do so peacefully.
Zimbabwe now reportedly has the world's most expensive gasoline. Quickly, do you think these protests are likely to stop as long as this continues to be the case?
Well, the government hasn't backed down on that fuel price hike, and this was a 3-day strike. There are signs that we're starting to peter out. People are going back. The government's urging people to go back to work. There's a bit more traffic on the streets, and a few shops have been opening. Schools have said that they'll open tomorrow. So people were unprepared for the scale of this shutdown. So I think that they'll likely be venturing out for food and supplies and to do work. But it's unclear what will happen in the days ahead, given that Zimbabwe's economic problems look set to continue.
Thanks very much, Ryan Truscott, there for us in Harare. In other news, in South Africa, a top lawyer is calling on the courts to go further in looking into the murder of in 2013, a former Rwandan intelligence chief, Patrick Karegeya. He was found dead in a hotel in South Africa in 2013. and his family have accused Rwandan President Paul Kagame's government of being behind the killing. Now, it's denied this, but Pretoria's being accused of a cover-up and failing to go after the men suspected of the killing. Nicolas Chemin has more.
5 years after his death, Patrick Karegeya's friends and family gathered in this Johannesburg courtroom. The former Rwandan intelligence chief was found dead in a hotel room near Johannesburg. On Tuesday, the family's lawyers said they wanted a proper investigation. They claim South Africa has not done enough to find the suspected killers, who were identified 5 years ago by the lead investigator.
All these facts were known in January 2014. Inexplicably, Your Worship, there is no indication that any steps were taken to trace the suspect at all. Not a single statement that the police took steps to trace the suspect.
The Rwandan government has denied allegations that it was behind the killing, but Karegeya's family is convinced that it is.
Rwanda would know that they have no right to come and kill the people in the country that is not theirs. It should be a lesson even for Rwandese to stand up for themselves and say this is not the right thing to be done, and there should be sanctions on that country because of what it's doing.
Karegeya was found dead in this hotel. He used to be very close to President Paul Kagame, but in 2007 he settled in South Africa and started accusing the Rwandan head of state of being a dictator. Kigali denied having assassinated Karegeya, but less than 2 weeks after his death, Kagame declared that treason brings consequences. Kayumba Nyamwasa, who also lives in South Africa, is another former ally and now strong critic of Kagame. He has survived several assassination attempts. In 2014, South Africa expelled 3 Rwandan diplomats in connection with an attack on Nyamwasa's home in Johannesburg.
Well, that's RFI and Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.
En France 24 nos esforzamos por brindar la mejor información hecha por periodistas de Latinoamérica y del resto del mundo.
We look at how technology is shaping the future, and we show you the latest gadgets you can soon get your hands on.
نقدم لكم الاقتصاد بطريقة مختلفة، نبسط المفاهيم والمصطلحات كي تكتمل الصورة لديكم.
Aquí puedo hablar de medio ambiente, no solo de los problemas que afectan a nuestro planeta, sino también de iniciativas y soluciones que a veces no tienen espacio en televisión.
La différence sur France 24, c'est l'idée du reportage. Nos grands reportages, vous ne les verrez nulle part ailleurs.